Squint. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. I think Italy flanker Giada Franco's mum said it best.
I love this game, this rugby, beautiful rugby.
I'm not sure rugby has ever had a year quite like 2022. Whilst it's not all been ups, rarely has the sport ever seen so many moments of sheer ecstasy from so many unlikely sources. An entire calendar rammed with wonders, worries, weirdness, woodman, wigs, wins, losses, laughs, luck, and things to love. And so, as the curtain comes down on this most out there annum, what better way to see it out than to celebrate the 208 moments where rugby made us sit up, shout, scream, squeal, or stop to realise how silly this all really is. So, may I present to you the incredibly comprehensive celebration from literally about 2,000 moments I had on a long list, the celebration of the 208 greatest rugby moments of 2022. And where better to start than with the Pope riding an elephant onto the pitch. Hindu entered the final of Argentina's URBA Top 13 League as the underdogs, but the team produced a hell of a performance, resulting in the team celebrating their win and their most famous son, albeit without the Father or Holy Ghost, in the only way they could, obviously. And sticking to the pitch itself, we can't forget this moment of magic from Marcus Smith, mountains of Montpellians and the cameraman falling for an outrageous dummy before Marcus and Murley put Marchant away for the try. Or how about these two absurd kicks by Manny Lebocq? This conversion in overtime to put his side into the inaugural URC final is, decent, but this 50-22 is so good a referee probably would have awarded it even before the law came in. There's then this absurdly wholesome moment by Roger Tuatavashi-Sheck going one better than just signing a fan's boot, asking her to sign his shoes as well so they can trade. Her face is almost as packed with joy as Sia Khaleesi's when coach Wanky Stick slips up here at a press conference.
Malcolm Marx is going to be playing his 50th game. It's fucking massive sorry for the language. It's actually massive for him.
And speaking of sticks and South Africans, here's Argentina flanker and maybe one of the breakthrough players of the year, Juan Martin Gonzalez, snapping Villy Leroux's ankles like they are out-of-date twiglets, only to be outdone by an even more absurd try by the female Fijian drover. Offload 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, she's under the post. This was just one of the many glorious tries the Fijian drover scored on their way to an incredible, totally unexpected upset result, winning the Super W competition in their first year as a team, never mind in the competition, winning virtually every game through playing the most ridiculous, offloading, glorious running rugby. However, they'd be grateful they didn't come up against one Lewis Rees-Hammett making try-savers like this, or the player who will feature most often on this list, because whilst there's a place for like Antoine Dupont and Lukani Ram and Andy Scarrett and all of those other, beloved world-class players, if this list is to celebrate rugby joy emanating from the most unlikely places, I don't think there's a better source of that than Italy and Benetton's reserve prop, Ivan Nemer. With both hookers sent off the field for 70 whole minutes, Neymar found himself forced to throw in for almost the entire game against Ireland, and despite claiming he'd never thrown a line out once in his life, Neymar nailed every single throw Italy had all game, making him the only player in the 2022 Six Nations to hit his jumper on every single occasion with a 100% success rate. Neymar flies under the radar, but this guy is a faultless, patient god just waiting to be unleashed from the bench by any coach who fancies a curly-haired cheat code coming into their team. It's an accuracy he shared with former Samoa lock Jota Traore, who closed out his career by showing in his very last game, turns out he was also always a world-class goal kicker. And on the subject of last games, the penultimate test of 2022 turned out to be an unbelievable stunner for the ages. Wayne Pivac's way was finally clicking after 3 years of squalid bullshit, scoring some blinders on their way to a commanding 21-point lead. A lead that the Wallabies just ate up until the ball fell just right. And Australia were over in the corner and then under the post afterwards for one of the most unlikely victories in their nation's history in the middle of an equally historic injury crisis. And then we have a bunch of beautiful tries. This finish by Owen Lane is brilliant against Harlequins, and this subtle bit of play by Jaden Hendrickson to put Farsi in, excellent. But perhaps even more impressive is this pair of all-timer prop tries from the aforementioned Super W competition. The kind of tries that make me worry front row forwards are just getting too powerful. And maybe they need to be stopped. Or maybe there's just nothing we can do. We just need to accept our new front row overlord. However, it is all fine because, second rows are all just doing exactly their jobs and nothing more. Just ask Benetton's Federico Roots. For Federico, we've talked about this. You're not a centre. We've talked about this. one day you'll behave. We're going to need to show Josh Dixon doing one of the sneakiest turnovers of the year to make up for this. And speaking of sneaky, here's Welsh internationals Lee Byrne and Ken Owens both getting caught on TV drinking and then panicking, or maybe they were just remembering Gabby Logan, Lord of War, showcasing her true powers at last, or this absolutely unbelievable finish by Madars Tambaway. If you think it's good so far, just wait for it. There it is. You know, what a try, what a finish. We have this glorious display from the URC's new cheerleaders, yeah. We have some sneck from Tom Wright here taking out Geordie Barrett, and this absolutely glorious pass from Japan League 1. Damien McKenzie and Isaac Lucas combining for some magic loveliness. That quick trip to Japan meant it's probably high time we check in to see how MLR still do. Yep, that's it. Inexplicable ball boy front flip. Seems just pretty bloody MLR. Everything very much as it was. However, whilst this fella riding a motorbike across the pitch last year was a pretty good attempt to establish a new best mascot in rugby, that title itself still belongs to Jaguardo. The one-time Jaguares mascot, famed for shit like this, and even this, has been, well, as this remarkable documentary footage captured, suffering since the Jaguares split up. Sad, broken and constantly crying. Nobody in rugby found more unexpected joy this year than our friend Jaguardo when he got one unexpected phone call.
Hola Jaguardo, ¿cómo estás? Soy Juli Montoya, capitán de los Pumas. Te llamo porque estuve viendo tus posteos en redes y charlando con el equipo queremos que te sumes como mascota de los Pumas.
The return of Jaguardo to the Argentina setup, coming in 183 places too low at 184. We have the time Ian Foster almost ruined the All Blacks and their aura because he was simply too busy being hooked on the world's favourite website builder, Squarespace, which everyone loves, especially Ian Foster. Their relentlessly excellent, ever-growing web design options leading him to neglect the team's performance and preparation against Ireland as he just focused entirely on trying to make his sites look so super cool, which he obviously managed effortlessly, even integrating a mailing list to send updates to his team about the site instead of actually like training schedules and stuff. This is a true story. Foster was able to set up a clean, lovely, professional looking website easily inside the 80 minutes the game gave him. Listing his CV. To know more about it, you can head to the link in the description, use the offer code SquidRugby and save yourself some cash and learn just how addictive making websites on Squarespace can be. Honestly, you'll have a great time and not get addicted. Next, however, a moment in a lifetime as Australia won the World 7 Series for the first time ever. Incredible scenes after an unbelievable season that saw them seize Twickenham for the first time too. Honestly, Australia's men's and women's sevens teams this year have been on absolute fire. Arguably the greatest year they've ever had in sevens history. A moment that Andrew Callaway then properly celebrated by showing he has a serious second talent for the bagpipes. More incredible, however, is one that I did not see coming. Wheelchair Rugby League. Unlike wheelchair rugby, league's equivalent follows the rule of the able-bodied sport, the running game as they call it, with games lasting 80 minutes, kicking incorporated into the rules, and yet it's even more lethal and fast-paced than either code's traditional versions. Wheelchair Rugby League might be the greatest sport in the world, and the platform it was given at this year's Rugby League World Cup allowed so many more of us to discover it, and it probably would have been a top 10 moment if it technically wasn't a different sport and therefore should be part of a different, the greatest Rugby League moment of the year, but I don't care. It's amazing. Watch it. Another amazing moment came on the other side of the world, as Japan came within the final play of adding the bloody All Blacks to the list of Tier 1 conquests, pushing New Zealand all the way, an incredibly tight and compelling test match. Kazuki Himeno, typically exceptional. At 79, nothing quite like a brother-on-brother bumper to set up a Sunday dinner quite nicely. Should be a fun conversation there. 178, Cheslin Colby here, about to prove that the kick is only ever as good as the chase. Whilst an even better day for wingers came here. It was almost 3 whole years since Welsh Rugby's embarrassing younger brother, the Dragons, last won a game at home. And then, looking set for another close but no cigar game, young winger Rio Dyer steps up to do this. One of the best individual tries of the year out of absolutely nowhere to give the Dragons a win nobody saw coming and himself a first few caps for Wales that autumn. And speaking of things nobody saw coming, Uruguay certainly didn't see 24-stone Tonga prop Ben Talmafina coming. Likely the first intercept of his career, and judging by the relief on both him and Uruguay winger Amiala's face, they'll hope both the last. Or indeed how nobody expected the Azzurri at this year's World Cup. Italy headed the tournament as a classic, well, you know, they could cause some problems type team. The side that everyone knew could click, that could do some damage, but nobody really expected to. But then they did. It happened. Glorious 10-12 combination Veronica Madia and Beatrice Rigone pulling the strings as they shot to a huge bonus point upset win against the USA, far stronger, more traditional team in women's rugby, and became the first Italian team, men's or women's, to ever qualify for the knockout stages of a World Cup. Just absolutely amazing. They were so much fun to watch at the World Cup. Looking at the other World Cup from a few years ago, Namibia and Canada this year finally played out their cancelled fixture from 2019. Namibia pulling off what would have been, if it had taken place and you just move this result over, the first ever Rugby World Cup win. A moment they just lost out on. And this year also gave us the biggest ever win by a Tier 2 team over a major nation, as Georgia's under-20s put in a hard-to-believe performance as they beat Scotland by over 50 points over this summer. At 172, we have a very unique assist by Harbour RFC right here, whilst here we have a lovely moment as Scotland captain Rachel Malcolm handed the mascot a toy Nessie, which makes her beam so warmly throughout the entire anthem. And 170 is just a different kind of captaincy. Italy's Michele Lamero, incredulous as he tries to talk the referee out of reducing his side to 13 for almost the entire game in one of the most wow, this is happening games and moments of the year.
No, it's a ruling. It's a law.
We have to play the whole game. Hey!
We have this phenomenal try-saving tackle by Rafter Quirk, incredible shithousery by Wales under-20s David Jenkins here, sneaking into the South African huddle and stealing their water. Jamal Ford-Robertson's absolute elation and alarm at ending up on the end of a screamer here in front of the full shed itself. The complete opposite to Jamie George, who runs a perfect support line here, only for Elliot Daly to give it to Ben Earl instead. Fuming. Absolutely fuming, and rightly so. Something very different from another England hooker here, as the ref has clearly had enough of Amy Cocaine's antics.
Hope Rogers does as well.
1, 2, 3. Hey mate, stop counting.
Whilst if we stick with a team, the Red Roses game against France was a real physical humdinger, a muscular march between two evenly matched teams desperate for a breakthrough. And whilst England's came in the first half, it was only late on that France's fly half, Caroline Drouin, having a pretty ropey game up until then, pulled this incredible moment of magic.
À la fois, Madame Neuville est mieux placée que nous. La passe au pied magnifique pour Griset. Elle a des cannes. Jordan Griset. Ça y est. Peut-être laisser des bleus. Oui, la passe pour Gaël Hervé, la capitaine Gaël Hervé.
Magnifique essai des Françaises.
To create the try ultimately finished by a captain, Gaël Hermé. Just a brilliant, compelling, just like stare at the screen and take it all in type game with a moment of like involuntary noises, but not quite that one. A roar from the crowd coming that was almost as loud as this.
Chiefs are making a change. The away side is making a change, and never has an away replacement been greeted with such joy.
The biggest ever cheer for an away sub, as Santiago Grondola's entire local club from Argentina travelled over to see their former teammate make his Premiership debut for Exeter. How about this? Heaton Moor RFC captain Mike Ireland retired this year, but not before playing one last game for Pack unlike any other. Himself at tight head and his 7 sons completing the pack. 7 siblings. And whilst Mr. and Mrs. Barrett only have managed to get 3 into the same team, at least Geordie Barrett got to sell beans this year.
Don't worry guys, it's not going to hurt, but I'm still going to eat you.
We have the incredible day here that Tom Ramos forgot that he spoke French. And then the day Jared Evans let the funky music do the talking, yeah, as he nails this unbelievable kick in the 80th minute as Cardiff beat Leinster for the first time in 7 seasons. He was carried aloft afterwards, much like this lovely moment from South Africa as Jordan marked a career coming to an end with a fitting tribute from both teams. We have this remarkable moment of heightism from Luke Pearce as the teams come out after half time, assuming fullback Mike Lowry is the 9 because he's the shortest player. Here's Santiago Arata box kicking with his bum out, and from bums to the dog's bollocks, Mateo Carreras running in 2 of the greatest individual tries you will ever see for Newcastle during the Premiership season this year. What can you say about this? At 156, we have this absurd game between Po and Toulouse. The underdog somehow stretching out to a 17-3 lead. Incredible work. But then centre to Muamanu saw red, and then Po still managed to score this try before Jalé Vatabua also then saw red with 4 players, I can't really count, left on the pitch. Po just had to hang on for dear life. Toulouse ripping through them at every opportunity. There are 3 players remaining now. Just had to do whatever they could to hold out and eventually kick the ball out to take the win in front of an erupting stadium. Keith Earls nailed maybe the most unlikely 50-22 imaginable this year, only to be outdone by this guy from a local club who England Rugby didn't credit in their post. Absolutely unbelievable. Now, please take this reminder of Feketi's incredible team try at the Stade de France earlier this year against France as a means of introducing the Dave Cherry section for the most gorgeous visual treats in rugby this year. So earlier this year, the Scarlets accidentally announced a new signing via Fafita was dead. The Tel Aviv Heat beat Saracens in an absolutely amazing set of scenes that nobody saw coming, least of all the bookies who gave the Saracens a 31-point head start. Italy and Scotland played out an incredibly close game, eventually decided by the Azzurri pack at the end, but not before Emma Wassell's try put Scotland ahead, something that her mum enjoyed quite a bit.
Oh, sugar. It's over.
The MLR final, however, was an occasion for the entire family. Looking like they'd miss out on the playoffs a few weeks out, Rugby United New York put together some really fine form to squeeze into the championship game, and when they got there, well, an inspired MVP performance from former All Black and veteran of every international team that's played for about a decade, Andy Ellis saw New York upset Seattle Seawolves to take the title and provide Ellis with an incredible finale for what has been a really remarkable career for him. 11 years after being the guy that kicked the World Cup final ball off, he got to do it in MLR, which is presumably even better for him. We have 2 incredible moments from Australian Super Rugby this season, ridiculous from Rob Valentini, and then the Waratahs here scoring from 1 dummy kick and 11 passes. 11, Tommy Bowe is losing his mind, as is like Finn Russell, whoever does lots of passes. It's absolutely amazing. Mark Nwangari-Tanase absolutely at his best, the whole team clicking around each other. It's absolutely amazing. You look at this try and ask, what more can you possibly want from rugby? Well, you can have this from the top 14 for free anyway, as Bordeaux execute a classic old school hands down the line without a single hitch, without anything going differently. Then we have, well, this.
Van Wijk, Becker Odendal, Wakita, Kumkiti Sataki, Akupi Potilia Mabe, Pipila Nota, Becker Odendal.
And next, the duality of the rugby player. As the referee begins the standard, you've scrummaged well up until now, spiel, cue, Canadianisms.
Thank you.
And played against Owen Farrell, missing his second successive shot at goal. How about Xander Fagerson being slightly too honest on live TV after beating England?
Firstly, how's the head? Decent celebration last night?
Yeah, no, it was good fun. I had an early night.
caught with the family today, but I think a few boys definitely ripped the arse out of it, yeah.
And I'd be pretty sure Damien Willemse ripped the arse out of something or other as well. The first test between Wales and South Africa was one of the most unexpectedly excellent games of the year. Momentum swinging left and right, and just as Wales looked entirely out of it, actual monster Dewi Lake does this, and it leaves the Springboks desperate. Willie le Roux pulling the strings as they get into the Welsh half in overtime and earn themselves a penalty.
Important kick for Willemse. It's looking good. Damien Willemse wins it for the Springboks.
Still, it's not as good as Morgan Parra doing this, or this fight in the French third division, which ended somehow with an extraordinary 5 red cards. Or here's Francine having a casual chat with the referee, bit of a laugh, then casually again knocking over a touchline conversion before downing a pint with a fan on the sidelines. Something Jake White then one-upped in October when he offered to personally buy 1,000 fans in the ground a pint. Munster's Craig Casey, on the other hand, probably owes just 2 people pints. This fan, right here, after he scored, and Joey Carberry after he punched him in the face whilst celebrating a try. But what is better than free beer, I hear you ask? Well, Japan's Yutaka Nagare knows, because for his mother's 60th birthday this year, he decided he would get her just what she always wanted, a photo with former All Black and his teammate, Damien McKenzie, the halfback partner he plays with every week. This is what his mum wants for her birthday, a photo with his colleague. And whilst one birthday was getting celebrated there, I think at least 6 or 7 for me passed whilst watching this. An utterly surreal moment of sevens. England burst through, but instead of scoring, Will Homer stops still. And so does time. Knowing this try will put them into the quarterfinals, England are happy to run the clock down from beneath the sticks. But knowing their points difference, if they only concede 7 more, will get them through as well, Argentina are happy to let them hang about. What follows is 3.5 minutes of time wasting. Both teams letting the clock wind down. Utterly surreal. Really bizarre. 126. This, the rugby photo of the year, taken by Bob Bradford, capturing the moment Caden Murley scores in the corner. Right here. Now I'm going to let you watch a fight from the Pro Day Duh. Why does the coach have a shopping trolley? That's my one question.
Ça doit être très dur pour la lanterne rouge de cette Pro D2 et du coup, un peu de frustration. Marc Del Puxos, il en a vécu une première bagarre qui va repartir sur la droite de votre écran. Bon, c'est un derby, mais on ne peut forcément pas vraiment saluer ses attitudes et Monsieur Descotes va renvoyer 2 joueurs au vestiaire encore.
And now, Xander Duplessis, very proud of his own strike of the ball. Further celebrations abound here. Channel favourite Willie le Roux scoring from a man who might just be rugby's most horrible cunt, making a howler of an error in the final play here. And Nick White, one of the most audacious dives in rugby history here. It's very rare to see Faf de Klerk out scrum halved, but this incredible moment of shithouse gamesmanship from White leaves the referee with no decision. There is contact to the face of Yorkatu. It's got to be a yellow card, therefore. The little prick is going to get exactly what he wanted. Nobody likes it, but it proved to be the match winner for Australia. Martin Yosefo here finishes from an audacious piece of skill by the USA's Ruben de Haas against Chile, but the next entry comes from Chile itself, and most notably, Condor's back row Raimundo Martinez, who sent me this. It's the last play of the Chilean Cup final. Lagaros of Rentos have come up with a huge turnover. All they need to do is tap it and kick it out, and they won the league.
¡No, la puta! ¡Me estoy hueveando! ¡Me estás hueveando! ¡Me estoy hueveando! ¿Quién me lleva a la casa? ¿Quién me lleva a la casa? ¡Me estáis hueveando! ¿Pero por qué no reventaste esa pelota, culiada?
Mira para atrás, una para el lado, la puta.
¡La puta!
Somebody drive me home indeed. Sideline comments almost as good as what we saw in France here, as Rona O'Gara and Christophe Ures get pretty well acquainted, I think you could say quite safely. Honestly, more of this please. I want more of this. I want more manager fights on the sideline. Why does football have to have a monopoly on this? I want this in rugby. More of this, which is actually exactly the same thing France's women were saying to the bar staff a few months ago. With the bronze game and the final played back to back, France found themselves securing third, then left with nothing to do until the big dance was done, yet needing to hang around to get the medals. So they went to the bar. 2 hours later, some thoroughly bladdered French women swaying onto the pitch, having emptied Eden Park of red wine. Pauline Bourdon in particular just making a general scene of the entire pitch. Here's 3 moments of absolutely absurd skill from top 14 teams, a league that begs the question, what if steamrollers did ballet? And also, Teddy Thomas was there? And also, what would happen if at one point a centre in one of these games asked to leave the pitch to do a poo?
Eh bien non, faites un remplacement tactique. Ouais, on peut. Ouais, tactique. Ouais, voyez avec mon assistant.
Yes, a player actually had to be subbed off in France this year to have a shit. That league has everything. At 114, a record that might stand for a very long time, as Benetton's Rhino Smith managed something that has never happened in professional rugby before, as he became the first player ever to score 29 points in consecutive games of professional rugby. And I just love this. University of Wisconsin's women's team decided, enough of this, holding a sevens tournament the day of their prom, where all the players had to take part in their prom dresses. Here's Antoine Dupont being a utter ridiculous freak. You know, he does this. He gets back up to his feet, and he's a freak all over again. Bloody Antoine. A rare moment as Italy v Scotland under-18s finishes 0-0, probably the highest profile 0-0 rugby match in at least a decade. Jazz Joyce here with some insane handling skills. Here's a prop nailing a drop goal from halfway late on because you deserve a treat. Here's Ivan Nemer! Yes, he's back! Nailing a 50-22 because he is a flawless god and we need to start recognising it. Here's a massive bollocks shithouse try from a fly-off who probably received a few cheap shots immediately after this. And speaking of, rugby's biggest flash twat bros, Quay Cooper and Will Genia, were reunited in Japan this year, and of course they got right back to their old school, overly flashy, uber skillful bullshit of old. And speaking of bros, here's a rough translation of the Quio brothers bringing the ref into their backyard bickering.
C'est un cadre. 3e minute, vous parlez déjà. Non, hey, j'ai pas fini. Pardon, vous parlez une première fois. Si la pénalité suffit pas, vous irez voir sur le bord de tout ce qui se passe. C'est pas trop, il a été éduqué où, lui?
Here's an absolutely ridiculous try for you. Here's some absolute antics involving Damien Penaud. And then some more as Demba Bamba absolutely nutmegs him. However, the best nutmeg of the year was this, by Rufus McLean, nutmegging himself and yet somehow turning it into a try. At 101, Jess Breach and the other Red Roses reflect on what they'll do when they head home and the World Cup finishes.
What are you most excited to do when you get home?
Have a Wagamama's. Oh.
And at 100, 2 huge moments for 2 of rugby's proudest old clubs. Munster and Bristol both came up against South Africa this autumn, and the touring team faced fired up sides knowing this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And neither side let it slip. I was at Ashton Gate for the game that made Bristol officially joint world champions, with Munster, who already won the World Cup themselves with South Africa a few years ago anyway, but really doubled down by beating them in the Ultra World Championship Bowl right here. Just absolutely amazing moments, and nothing could be more worthy of the now coveted, officially, number 100 spot. At 99, Joe Marchant goes in here for an absolutely audacious finish, and at 98, I'll hand it over to the Enzorsa commentary.
That's it. Over. White cow. Kangalo 50-22.
Back to MLR, here's a scrum so powerful it knocked over the posts. Here's Ivan Nemer! Yes! Showing some incredible skill to start an unbelievable score for Italy against Romania this summer, eventually finished by Nicolo Canone. This is an absolutely glorious magic ball from Owen Farrell against Cardiff, and this is just a beautiful moment. Having recovered from leukemia to play again this season, Christian Lealiafano's son, the then brought on the kicking tee to help him score his 1000th point of pro rugby. A rare achievement made all the more special, but it's matched here. For many Welsh fans watching, Shane Williams scoring and James Hook narrowly missing the conversion was a staple of our childhoods, an iconic pairing that had now departed and left us to remember wistfully. Except, well, after Shane scored in James Hook's one-off testimonial game earlier this year, who should step up but Hook's son Harrison to do what his dad almost did so many times? 92. Proof Eddie was right about Clive Woodward having too much time on his hands. Antoine Dupont returns here with one of the maddest assists of 2022, and yet mildly one-upped as a piece of skill by Portugal's Nuno Sousa Goeda, who pulled this in the biggest game of his life. Absolutely filthy stuff. And then the Stormers, who did this just because they could, just because they wanted to. You'd do it too if you could, you know. I certainly would. I would say that for absolutely certain. How about this, by the way? One of the greatest moments in Sri Lankan rugby history, though actually not the only moment from Sri Lanka on this list, as a split second's luck reward a lifetime of hard work in handing them a try against the actual All Blacks at the Commonwealth Games earlier this year. I couldn't find the next clip in Spanish, so let's just hope the French commentary can do how much this meant to Argentina justice, because this was a huge result at Twickenham.
Leur tournée de novembre. Oh là là, c'est perdu. Allez, c'est terminé. Victoire de l'Argentine, Benoît.
Énorme exploit des Argentins qui s'imposent d'un point à Twickenham face à l'Angleterre, 30-29. Cette année, les Argentins auront battu l'Australie, mais ils seront allés gagner en Nouvelle-Zélande face aux All Blacks et en Angleterre à Twickenham. Quel exploit de l'Argentine en revanche.
And at 86, a moment so good they did it twice. These were the scenes in February when Italy under 20 defeated England for the first time ever. Treviso. Captain Giacomo Ferrari, absolutely outstanding in a really tight 6-0 win. The only way this can feel any better, doing so in a cup competition to knock England out after scoring 38 points. This team are going somewhere. Keep an eye on them. They're going to be seriously good. And speaking of going places, well, Racing's Juan Imhoff rarely stops. A moment encapsulated by this. Imhoff's 100th try for the club, something only previously achieved by 5 men in professional rugby history. But whilst that's very impressive, here's Portia Woodman's 200th try for the Black Ferns, for her national team. However, if that kind of longevity impresses you, this is North Shields RFC applauding club legend Arnie Wilson off the pitch as he plays his last game before retiring, aged just 73 years young. Jukebox Sexquake feeling very motivated right now. This January, meanwhile, the WRU faced a dilemma. They just signed a new sponsorship deal with Papa John's and had women's captain Sean Lillicrap ready and waiting to take promo photos for the announcement, but the entire men's squad had flown to Dublin to get battered by Ireland in the opening round of the Six Nations. But they did have one solution. Left out the squad despite some great form for Cardiff, Wales called up flanker Jim Botham for one day just to hold a pizza box in brand new WRU stash he hadn't worn before, and then released him back to Cardiff on the Tuesday. No caps, but one iconic quote under his belt. Papa John's and rugby certainly do go together, Jim Botham. Thank you for your service and contributions to Welsh rugby this year. France headed into this year's World Cup with maybe the most feared pack in women's rugby, scrummaging everybody off the park for basically 4 whole years. And then, in their opening game, they played South Africa. Sanasi Ray Charlie and co demolishing their pack and setting a platform for Asile Hele to become maybe the player of the pool stage. Absolutely outstanding. A Springbok pack that may have changed the women's game in South Africa forever at 81. At 80, the Mayor of Madrid here attempts to drop gold at an official ceremony, and even stronger words in Spanish used here than by the guy whose face got hit, as Uruguay qualified for the World Series for the first time ever. The biggest result in their 7-sides history. And again, here, more strong words in Spanish. The backfire of the year from Augustin Creevy, about to be binned, and animated Creevy convinces the referee to check what he did with the TMO, and he'll find out there was nothing. Except when he looks, he sees no, it was a clear headbutt, and changed the decision from a yellow card to a red. I have no idea now what's going on in these behind-the-scenes footage from Romania's training session, but have a look.
Măi, tu ce faci, mă? Nu știi? Moroșan. Ia auzi aici. Dar după pui de Moroșan, să nu dai cu bolovan, că dacă-l nimeri, vai de capul tău asi.
I know perfectly well, however, that Toulouse here are absolutely over the moon, celebrating early as Pauline Bourdon lines up the conversion in overtime that will win them the league title. And hey, as you were celebrating, yes, you watching at home earlier this year when your club won their biggest game of the year. You know, for me, I support the Ospreys for my sins, so for me it was beating the Scarlets by a record scoreline, running in 50 whole points and like a billion tries seemingly. But if you support, like, I don't know, Gloucester, maybe it was you battering Saracens on the last day of the Premiership season. Or if you're an Edinburgh guy, maybe beating Glasgow at the end of the season. Whatever your club's biggest win was, here it is. Here it is at number 75. At 74, this absolutely ridiculous try from the New Zealand Barbarians against the Hurricanes. I think the commentators about sum it up right here.
Oh my giddy aunt.
And from one barbars to another, as Zach Kibarigi let his inner rugby nerd come flooding out, celebrating his try here by offering homage to the classic Contepomi celebration from years gone by. And 3 moments of mass celebration here. Spain had an unbelievably frustrating year, qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since 1999, only to be disqualified shortly afterwards. But whilst the lawyers worked, the team got a chance to take their frustrations out on the pitch, and they showed they would have belonged in that tournament as they took on Canada and produced one of the finest wins in their history, one of the most unbelievable performances they've ever put in, absolutely destroying Canada so badly you'd think they're Kingsley Jones. We now go live to the final of the Sri Lankan schools competition. It's the last play. Everything is on the line. All is to play for.
Minutes away from the league champions being crowned here at Havelock Park. If it stays like this, it will be a green story. Here's Di Costa to Kanishka. Gives it to Silva. Silva out to Mihisara. Mihisara shoots and goes. Mihisara off to Stefan. Is he going to call it? Has just won the Dialogue Schools Rugby League 2022 with that score. Absolutely incredible stuff.
An incredible occasion, and something that hopefully translates into a fair few more tries for the national team against big dogs in years to come. Something England themselves actually pulled off this year, producing one of the greatest comebacks of all time against the All Blacks this autumn, playing beautiful, technically exceptional rugby to score 3 tries in 7 minutes and escape with a draw at the end. Freddie Stewart's try in particular is one of the best passages of rugby you'll ever watch. I recommend just looking over it and nerding out a bit. Exceptional by England, but apparently not good enough for the RFU, but you know, there we go. Here's the Fijian drawer scoring a try with, I counted, and it's actually 6,004 offloads. Here's a great rugby values moment from the Welsh Premiership. You know, it's just 2 players being sent off at the same time. They leave the pitch together as brothers, as friends, ready to have a beer together and talk about all the good times that a game of rugger has helped them to overcome the feelings that they bury very deep down inside, that they never talk about, that they never really refuse to let out or face head on, because that's not what men do. Just a beautiful moment here, showing that rugby truly is different. It truly is a game full of great values. A spirit that, to be fair, we did actually see in Worcester. Now, I've always had a real soft spot for the Warriors, and it's never been more affirmed than the week the club went into administration. Not only did both the men and the women overcome unbelievable odds to pull off a pair of absolutely incredible wins in games they had no right to, but the entire community around the club just really rallied to get both games on. Everything from the social media team needing to use MS Paint to make the team sheet because their Photoshop license got revoked, to an army of volunteers who just made sure that everybody got one last chance to watch the club they loved play Premiership or Premier 15 rugby one more time. A real, genuine moment of rugby being at the heart of a community. At 66, the remarkable true story of Kenyan Sevens player Ferdinand Omanyala. Injured and out for the season, Omanyala started sprinting just as a means to keep fit, and slowly started to realise, oh, I'm pretty good at this. This year, Omanyala ran a 100-metre time of 9.77 seconds, making him the 2nd fastest man in the world, the 8th fastest man of all time, and the quickest Kenyan to ever live. Probably the only person to ever be glad he got injured. At 65, here's a guy doing a header for an assist in the Pro de Deux. At 64, 2022's form player, the best player on form in the world, Emiliano Boffelli's brilliant last-minute try to win the series against Scotland in the summer. And at 63, here's Caleb Clark's dad, Aroni Clark, former All Black himself, on The Masked Singer, New Zealand, showing he's actually got a pretty good voice.
Yeah, obviously.
When I see you hanging about with anyone, it's not unusual to see me cry. Oh, I wanna die. Oh, I wanna die. I wanna die. Wanna die.
But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Kick Clock Corner. Something that contributed massively to the top 14 this season. This is incredible by Zach Holmes, realising time is almost up and... But this, by Jeremy Fernandez, realising the clock is already on and the water boy then has to give the tee to the winger because it's the quickest player so he can get it over the fastest, get it to him. Fernandez, no time to line it up properly. He's just under enormous pressure. He's just got to go and do this. Bam. This, however, is just a really beautiful moment. Bristol scrum half Lucy Burgess seeing a little girl with her name on the back of her shirt for the first time ever. That's kind of what it's all about. This is a moment of unreal hands from whatever the ITM Cup is called nowadays. His Georgia fullback, David Niniashvili, pulling off maybe the two most difficult defensive jobs in rugby at once, smashing Ibanez backwards in the tackle, then getting up off the floor, chasing back and tackling Cheslin Kolbe. This should be some sort of defensive grand slam. He deserves some sort of trophy for this, executing both of those in 30 seconds like they were nothing. Sticking to fullbacks, Japan's Riehei Yamanaka scored two absolute beauties against France earlier this year. Two proper pearlers from a game where Nippon almost took France's unbeaten run off them. Speaking, however, of kind of this ramshackle rugby, this was just one of my favourite games of the year. The second test between Argentina and Australia was absolutely ridiculous entertainment. Both sides throwing every danger ball, chucking every miracle pass, looking for things that weren't on constantly and then just doing them anyway. Just, if it was fun, they did it. A high-scoring shambles of the best possible kind. But this, however, was even better. Fiji and South Africa were two real underdogs at this year's World Cup, two teams with extremely different strengths, knowing the game against each other would probably be their only chance of getting a win, knowing they were playing England and France, two of the three favourites for the competition in their other games. And so they ignored their own strengths and just decided to play the maddest rugby you've ever seen. There were more metres made in this game than any other international played this year, men's or women's. An absurd match full of breaks, openings, chances and utter chaos. Both teams coming so close and then not finishing for 80 straight minutes. It was so much fun. Then eventually, it came. South Africa taking the lead with seconds to play from an outstanding penalty. Only for the absolutely brilliant Fijian tight head Rasalea playing 80 full minutes to, in the very last play of the game, cross for the decisive score in a game that you thought already had absolutely everything. Here's an absolutely absurd drop goal from Adam Hastings, and another amazing moment here. The Pumas winning the Currie Cup for the very first time. A moment that meant everything to the players, but somehow even more to those in the stands who spent a lifetime watching and only being able to dream until it finally came. Just as it did for Wigan's favourite slap-faced biscuit, the king of being in the right place at the right time, Chris Ashton, showing exactly what he does best for a hat-trick display against Bristol, going into the game just needing one score to become the Premiership's top try scorer of all time. He got free. That's just the Chris Ashton way. At 51, a very sad moment because this was the year Lionel Boxis finally left us. The greatest there's ever been. Bowing off the pitch for the last time ever. Yet, I know somehow I'll squeeze him to next year's wrap-up video as well. Into the top 50. This surreal moment as a second ball spills onto the pitch as La Rochelle are defending their own line in the last minute. A bonus ball loss that will no doubt send Ronan O'Gara onto a 6-night killing spree. Though, hey, at least he had some moments like this. An absolutely absurd, ridiculous, bonkers, you pick your own word. 11 for the field score from the tiny Port Town team. Just absolutely amazing. At 48, Peter Omani and his incredible sledge at Sam Cane. At 47, a commentary and a try the population of Fiji, I've been informed, knows by heart by now.
Bossy, and he got away from 1, 2, 4. Speedster alert. He gets the yellow boots pumping, gets it away to Ravovo, who says, let's go! Ravovo! Let the crowd tell the story. They love it.
And at 46, the moment all of Wales has tried instead to forget. A truly historic day in Cardiff this November as a brave final quarter by Georgia saw them pummel Wales into submission. Just their second Tier 1 scalp ever and their first away from home. The rugby world has been nodding appreciatively towards Georgia since about 2007, but that Saturday in the Principality might just be the day they had to start taking them seriously. At 45, dog on the pitch!
Got a dog on the park, that's great. The Subtle does well, that's brilliant defence. He ties the Hamilton Hawks fullback up, Sam McNeil taking the ground. The dog giving all sorts of advice out there.
This is great park footy.
No, hasn't even got a collar on, so they can't collar him. But he's giving the Hawks a bit of a rustle up, more than they've had. Oh, what a great enterprising...
And great
This is enterprising stuff.
Hamilton Centre, great thinking.
James Slattery, give yourself a clap, son. Put yourself down for an assist. Some of your best work there.
He's now my favourite back of the day, Jerry. I hate backs, but he's just got a vote from me.
At 44, another of the year's finest matches. Canada flew under the radar all World Cup, tolling top marks without much attention until they came up against nailed-on favourites, England. And, sure enough, Sophie de Goody's side gave them hell. England forced to scrap the hardest they had for 3 years, Canada matching all their strengths and finding weaknesses in a match that'll be very long in the memory, just as this will be for Selknam. Ever since dropping down from Super Rugby, Los Jaguares have been unbeaten in SLAR, no doubt powered by Jaguado's effervescent tears, winning every single game they've played until early this year, when they faced Chile's top team, Selknam. The Chileans took them to task, creating basically the biggest upset of the club season and ultimately propelling themselves into a final where they would face Penarol of Montevideo. It was a final that highlighted just how rugby is spreading across the subcontinent, with the Uruguayans becoming the first side from outside Argentina to ever win South America's biggest club prize. However, something even wilder happened in their North American counterpart a few weeks later, as the LA Giltinis found themselves in a little bit of a pickle, and not the one you're thinking of, as they lost not just Matt Gitto before the game, but then Luke's Burton and Carty to injury during the warm-up, leaving themselves without a single fly half to play just minutes before kickoff. Enter 43-year-old skills coach and former centre Orene Ai, who found himself forced to play 80 whole minutes out of position for the first time since retiring from rugby in 2015. However, this wasn't even the only time this happened in MLR this season. Here's Dallas Jackals S&C coach Matatoko Naudaheo, who had never played above university level before, drafted into play last second before scoring a try and playing so well they signed him as a player the following week. And speaking of signing, Gareth Anscombe might have just signed the cheque to drink for free for life across all of Wales in South Africa this summer. First, he throws one of the best passes you'll see all year for Josh Adams to score in the corner, and then he steps up, knowing he needs to nail his conversion to grant Wales their first ever win on South African soil in this fixture's 100-plus year history, just days after flying out late so he could stay home and witness the birth of his second child. And of course, that kick was never in doubt. But that wasn't it for Welsh kicking heroics this year. Wales started the 2021-2 World Cup really well with 2 great tries, but they then spent the second half weathering an incredible Scottish comeback. Megan Gaffney then scoring in the corner to bring Scotland level with just seconds left on the clock. Cymru then shows some incredible patience to create the opportunity, waiting for the penalty to be awarded. Regular kicker Robin Wilkins was just fresh on the field and not quite sure. So up steps scrum half Ciara Bevan.
Ciara Bevan I ennill y gêm dros Gymru. Ciara Bevan, mae di hoffi'r pys. Mae Ciara Bevan wedi sicrhau y fuddugoliaeth. Diwedlo dramatic yn Wangaraid.
Ciara's kick, joining the likes of Paul Thorburn, John Taylor, and now Anscombe himself in the great Welsh pantheon of late winners. At 38, it was some season by the Stormers. After starting the inaugural URC with a pretty shoddy run without a win, few probably saw them turning this around. And yet, come May, they had done the impossible, winning the league and setting a new standard for the URC in general going forwards. And speaking of standards, well, this might just be Italy's now. Ange Capowoodsor scoring 2 tries in a brilliant performance by the Azzurri to beat Australia for the first time in their history. Absolute scenes in Florence. There was another big upset just across another bit of mainland Europe as well. Portugal here, springing an enormous performance, defending incredibly well to hold Georgia to a remarkable draw. This was the first time since 2015 Georgia had failed to win a game in the Rugby Europe Championship, and the first time someone had come away from Tbilisi with anything other than a loss since 2009. This was the biggest result Portugal had had in about 10 years at this point. A huge result that could have put them into the repechage that would later, well, we'll see how that goes when they get there, so whether they can qualify for the World Cup. However, who needs a repechage when you have Rodrigo Fernandez? This is simply one of the best solo tries you will ever see. Out of absolutely nowhere, on a pitch muddier than the breakdown laws, scored by maybe the most freshly iconic player rugby has produced in some time. Rodrigo Fernandez with probably the best try of the year. Anyway, here's a TikTok from Fabien Gautier's daughter. Good to know those goggles never come off. And here's a heartwarming moment from Sedberg School.
Trust me. Look at me, Bob. I'm the shortest kid here. Listen, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're short, you're young. It doesn't matter if you're tall or hit. It doesn't matter if you're fat. It doesn't matter if you're tall. Well, you are a brilliant rugby player. You understand that? You're insane. You're actually insane for your age. You're insane. Come here, give me a hug.
Best teammate
It's
ever.
alright, alright?
Best teammate.
Really good.
Come on.
Come on.
But obviously, right, that is not what rugby is all about. Rugby is all about sledging and handbags. And boy, did Scotland and Argentina really show us the true values of the game. An absolute masterclass in shithousery. So over to you, Monsieurs Richie et Montoya.
It was good, but it was knock-on advantage first of all. Hey. Now things just overcooking. Away. The Verbals just needs to calm down. Okay, wait. Duan van der Merwe and Lucas Paulos having a bit of a kiss and a cuddle as well.
Calm down, you calm down. You don't say what you're doing. He's a ref.
Jamie, we've had a really nice game up to now. That's unnecessary. Any more and people will leave the field. Clear knock on, the Scotland scrum, and that was a good turnover. That's why we don't play advantage.
Set an example, big fan.
Richie needs to show the leadership to perhaps not get drawn into too much of that. Or will he feel that he still has a case to argue with the shove directed to touch? And it's in danger of overcooking once more. And is it becoming any more than grappling and holding? Goodness me, it is not what we want to see. Last game of the season internationally for these two sides, and everybody's piling in. It's going on off the ball as well with Stuart Hall.
Number one, I need him over as well.
He was the only one.
Well, we've got Jamie already here.
Okay.
Number one, please.
Really good example, you, huh? Very good. You must be
Number
proud.
one.
Whatever.
What I've just witnessed is unacceptable on a rugby field. Once my whistle blows, we stop. Okay? You two, what happened? Change the whole dynamic situation. You'll both leave the field.
You must be proud of you, huh?
At 31, here's an incredible save from a debutant commentator covering Uzbekistan versus Mongolia.
It'd be smart to just try and get this back. They are in some deep shit here. Shipwreck here. Excuse my language. Like I said, first time doing this.
At 30, this year, USA Eagle and NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins became the first ever international rugby player to arrive in space. Also, becoming the first person to watch an MLR match in space, which has been my lifelong dream since I was a child. I'm mostly just glad somebody out there's achieved it, because they ought to me doing it pretty long at this point. Here's an unbelievable pass from your king and mine, Tyke Furlong, outdone, however, by his former Lions teammate George Cruz, going all kinds of backheel batshit in his final game for the Barbarians, which is obviously the next goal from Emiliano Buffelli, who could probably knock one over backwards from, about 90 metres? If his immaculate display against the All Blacks is anything to go by. After years of turning up for a thrashing, this was a truly extraordinary moment that was so hard-earned by an Argentina team who just dug in, made the tackles, worked, and gave the All Blacks hell. At 26, here's Jamie George getting top bins on Soccer AM, and Equaltekers, which is a word I wrote in the script, I'm surprised I managed to get through it without joking, goes to this by Lucan Yoam, a try I have now seen so many times that it's actually dropped down the list because I'm just really used to it as though it's a normal thing to happen. But this is one of the most insane moments of skill possible. This should probably be in the top 10 if I hadn't watched it about 1 billion times by this time in December. What a try, man. Another excellent score by wasn't enough for the box on this day. However, there was a lot of talk about whether the All Blacks were done this summer, whether their aura was gone, whether this was the end of the All Blacks as we used to know them. And then they pulled this, a team rejuvenated, playing with purpose, identity, pace, and passion. They tore apart the Springboks on home soil. And the list of teams that have done that is shorter than the number of referees sending Razzie Erasmus Christmas cards. It was a breathtaking match to watch that split all narratives wide open. An equally important win at 23. 1 year earlier, women's rugby in Wales was a shambles. No support, no coaching, no points at home against Ireland at all. And then we got this. One of the biggest, best and most important performances in Welsh women's rugby history. A proper heart and soul performance from a team under a new coach who looked like they believed in themselves again. Honestly, as someone that's watched this team go through so much, it was one of the most moving and meaningful games I watched all year, all capped off with a brilliant solo score by stalwart Hannah Jones. A huge win, and the day this team became impossible now for the WU to ever ignore again. At 22, a moment that took celebrations up a few gears. Arthur Retier's 78th minute try to give the tiny town of La Rochelle the title of best team in Europe. Not just an underdog upset win, but a moment that meant so much to a town where the rugby club is the proper heart of the community, as shown by the incredible celebrations around the town, not just the day of the final, right? But this is a week later. This is like the Thursday. They continued throughout the entire week. The entire town just packed. At 21, the biggest pressure kick of men's rugby in 2022. Samuel Marques for Portugal, knowing if he's successful, points difference puts them into a Rugby World Cup for the first time since 2007. And if there's anybody in the history of Portuguese rugby you'd want to take this kick, it's probably the man taking it.
Marks for Portugal. They've done it! Portugal are on their way to the Rugby World Cup in France 2023.
Never in doubt. This was such an upset result I don't think many people saw coming at the start of the year. An absolutely phenomenal result that just shows how the game continues to spread across Europe and how much can be accomplished if we continue pushing it forwards and giving these teams the platforms and the chances to not only qualify but get other games as well. However, this year's World Cup gave us an opening day that reminded us why these tournaments themselves are so special and why there's such a scramble to always qualify for them. South Africa pushing the big dogs France. Fiji scoring some sensational tries against the most absurdly overpowered side in the sport's history. Seriously, Fiji was so entertaining to watch on that opening day. And then Australia playing what was referred to after the game as maybe the best half hour in their history. Maybe the best Wallaroos performance there's ever been, to get 17-0 up at a packed out Eden Park against the Black Ferns. Before the home side, with 40,000 at their back, struck. The Black Ferns whizzing up the sold-out crowd with rugby custom built to catch eyes and thrill souls. It was just an amazing day of rugby collated together at Eden Park. Anyone that went and saw all three games got a real World Cup treat. Here's Bunjoki stealing a man's chicken and running away.
Ole!
At 18, the Premiership Cup final, as eternally lovable underdogs Worcester faced Sex Pest Paddy's band of cunts in a David versus cunt matchup. Irish looked to have it locked up, but for an 85th minute try from a heroic Worcester to take it to extra time. Knowing as well they had an advantage on tries scored, that means if it remained a draw, they would win. And so London Irish needed to score just any points. Now, I find Paddy Jackson's face genuinely repulsive to look at, so over it as we watch him miss 6 shots at goal that would have won his team the game, I'm instead going to play some facts about how the criminal justice system in the UK and Northern Ireland actively protects perpetrators of rape and sexual assault, because it was a system designed by those men to protect those men rather than looking to seek justice, and I'll instead let us just enjoy maybe the sport's most disgusting human miss 5 kicks in extra time that would have won in the game. without having to look at his face. And instead, let's give all the credit to Worcester's resolve. Absolutely incredible defence, composure and patience, creating a moment that meant everything to their fans, who never thought they'd see the day this kind of silverware might come. It's been tough times since for Worcester, but it was amazing to see them have this moment in the sun right beforehand. 2 moments now for Abby Dow. Her try in the aforementioned semi-final against Canada is one of the best you'll ever see, especially in as tight, as tense and close a game as that, where there was so little space on the field, and yet her and fellow winger Claudia MacDonald combined to just make a try that we remembered for decades to come. But earlier in the World Cup, we had this. After an absolutely horrific injury in the Six Nations, Dow defied medical science to make it back onto the pitch and, with her first touch, turn Abby Dow into Abby Now into Abby Wow. Speaking of players who've sustained plenty of pain, however, long-term subscribers may remember the channel's wide-ranging pity for former France captain Guillaume Guirado. Frequently the only sane man in a labeler built on implosions. In the last game of his career, however, Guirado finally, after an entire career of suffering at the hands of too many teammates who were just too French for their own good, he finally got himself some good. Winning the top 14. At last, a moment he celebrated just the same way he marked every other game of his career, by smashing his head into a solid object. And maybe have a look what Vanton Ratters is doing in this clip. I would highlight it, but that would mean it would be flagged as explicit. Now, however, we head into the top 15. And I want to begin with a moment that needs no explanation.
Well, here comes Doddy Weir in his famous blue and yellow tartan, which will today be represented on the Scottish numbers, and it's the 5th anniversary of the setting up of the My Name's Doddy Motor Neuron Disease Foundation. 8 million has been raised and 50 million has been secured from the United Kingdom government, and every player from both sets comes over to applaud the former Scottish international and Lion.
The European Cup just lands different in Munster. Form goes out the window and drama seeps in instead. And this year's quarter-final against Toulouse was as good as it ever got. Moved to Dublin because the home ground was being used for an Ed Sheeran gig, the two sides then dished up a match well worth the extra travel time. Munster taking the game to the reigning champions and weathering a late storm to keep that game they took and bring it instead to extra time, where the deadlock still failed to break. And so came professional rugby's 3rd ever penalty shootout. Drama dripping, crowd watching through their fingers without any nails left, and all left eventually to Antoine Dupont to decide. The World Player of the Year slotting it and walking away like Mark Wahlberg leaving his exploding car. Just another one of those grand Munster matches in Europe. It wasn't actually, however, the only penalty shootout of the year. Spain v Portugal under 18s also went to penalty shootout, which, I mean, unbelievable scenes here. Just some really, really tense, great scenes in the final of the under 18s European Cup. Simply one of the best games of rugby ever played. The semi-final between France and New Zealand was almost a parody of the perfect rugby match. Two incredibly evenly matched teams with differing strengths, exchanging blow after blow, their best players standing up and scoring tries as the game went down to the final minute. Awarded the penalty right in front of the posts. Up steps Caroline Drouin, the French fly half so mercurial she's banned in parts of the EU, a French team that's been so French all tournament, betting the house on their least reliable player. But also, the individual who is most likely to produce an all-time moment out of nowhere. She scuffs it. The home team scramble. A packed crowd baying for the ball to leave the field. They get it off. New Zealand may be the ones headed for the final, but let's be honest, I've said this a lot and it's often a wanky statement to say, but for once, rugby truly was the real winner. We've had some upsets on this list, but none of them bigger than this, because this year saw the biggest upset in world ranking terms in the history of international rugby, as Algeria, ranked 82nd, beat Zimbabwe, the 27th best side in the world, in the 2023 World Cup qualifying. It's been an incredible year all round for Algeria rugby, also coming from 3 points of beating 32nd ranked Kenya in what itself would have been the biggest upset ever, smashing the previous record of just 26 places difference. This is a team on the rise, creating a moment they'll never get to forget. Pull an average rugby fan from the 2010s aside and ask them what their favourite rugby joke is, and they'll either say something reprehensible, or they'll say the French national team, which frankly was quite reprehensible. Dropping in popularity, importance and affection in the land of the Great Baguette, you can't quite overstate how important and meaningful this year's Grand Slam game against England was. Whilst France have come close the last few years, this was finally it. Labeller's chance to do something more. A side the nation now loved, playing rugby they adored and achieving a result they dreamt of. Rugby had never gone away in France, but as Antoine Dupont lifted that trophy, the entire nation knew the French national team was no longer a joke. Whilst Grand Slams are one thing, the most iconic moment for French rugby this year had nothing to do with the team. For this was the year an image we'll never forget was born. Antoine Dupont, in his bizarre, fluffy yellow dressing gown. Rugby has long since had a problem creating stars. Their values and nobody's bigger than the team attitude holding down players who want to shine. And so, seeing the best player on the planet front French GQ in the most unlikely fashion might be rugby's most important crossover moment since Johnny Wilkinson and David Beckham taught each other how to kick. A baffling moment of celebrity and Frenchness that I reckon comes to mind for many of us much quicker than anything he's actually done on the playing field this year. If you said, what's Antoine Dupont done this year? More people are thinking of the moment I'm putting at number 10 than anything he's actually done on the pitch. This is Alexandre, Georgian rugby's biggest fan. And on the pitch, he is witnessing something quite remarkable. Long before they beat loser underdogs Wales, which they always were going to do, it wasn't really an upset. We saw that coming ages out. Georgian rugby saw its greatest ever day this year as the team put on a stellar 80-minute show to defeat a Six Nations side for the first time ever. 2 tries from fly-half Tedu Absentadze and an amazing performance from young fullback David Niniashvili, combined with some astonishing forwards work to hold Italy out, saw a moment the rugby power rankings changed. They swung. Arguably the biggest win by a Tier 2 nation since Japan did what they did in 2015, and a day Alexandre will cherish forever. This might not look like much, but this is the Ukrainian national team training together for the first time since the invasion began. Not expecting to play any games, but coming together to find a moment of normality, of comfort, of togetherness in a hell all around them. I think everybody watching the channel has probably at some point used rugby, be it playing or watching, as a means of escapism, or of channeling and controlling the emotions pouring through them. And this is the most remarkable, extreme version of that you'll ever see. I also want to mention Leinster's Alex Soroka, half Ukrainian himself, for this post-match interview.
Well done on a great game and safe travels back home. Thank you, Slava Ukraine.
And Italy captain Michele Lamoureux, who strapped up the Ukrainian flag onto his leg to play the day after the invasion began. And, most of all, to Zebre, who took in and sheltered 2 entire rugby clubs from Ukraine and gave them places to stay, to escape, to shelter. This was not a great moment of rugby values. It was the human spirit, finding empathy with those in need and reaching out to connect through the one thing that they do have in common. Surely that's what sport is all about.
Pretorius, Smith, Angela Davids, Waka. Ayini, Uzbekman, nakasana bupina. Oh, nanda. Waitata, usikakete. Oh, yila bandwana. Baglomthenga. Ukwazi iminyengeza Pretorius. Izawuthini into? Pretorius umasambe. Angela David uzophinda wena. Uzophinda wena. Imano Angela David.
Kilo
njena uphethe okaphi wafika umila fondini Smith gqibezela man Jenison Cooper Davis uthi salibebe yiyo asana bayinokhona savangamo
ingathi bavumelene nje nkunzi ingathi bavumelene nje nkunzi.
When I was a kid, there was a TV show called Bernard's Watch about a little boy who could stop time using a magic pocket watch he had with him at all times. And look, I don't know for certain that the Bernard in that show didn't grow up to be a veteran Australian fly half, but Foley forgetting the watch would be one of the most plausible explanations for maybe the most talked about play of 2022. Looking to win the Bledisloe Cup for the first time since Bernard's Watch was actually on TV, Rob Valentini came up with a huge turnover, only for Foley to eat a little too much of the clock off. Referee Mathieu Reynal calling his bluff. An extraordinary time-wasting call, the like we never see, made all the more dramatic by the time in the game with 1 minute to go and Australia only one score up. Little piss boy boils, the All Blacks stay steady, and Geordie Barrett then scores in the corner. There's a few moments from this year's rugby that I feel confident will come up in 20 years' time, but none more so than this. The Bledisloe decider, where Foley couldn't kick it in time, will outlive all of us. One of rugby's great talking points played out before our eyes. Another image that speaks for itself. Irish rugby's greatest shithouse.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Scumbags! Hey. You know exactly what he's doing. Up and away. He knows exactly what he's doing. Scumbags! Yeah.
The most Munster man to ever live, Peter O'Mahony, being utterly overcome. Some said this was the greatest day in the history of Irish rugby, an unprecedented series win in New Zealand. A feat that scarcely happened in the sport's 200-year history, and something that the last time Ireland attempted saw them headed home with 66 points shoved up their arse. And yet, they did it. 2 heroic performances, including some career-best rugby from O'Mahony, making, when the result was no longer in doubt, it all a little bit too much. The Green King of Bastardry breaking, and it's beautiful to see. What a man.
That tells us everything. The hard man, Peter O'Mahony. And they're joined too on the sideline by those players that beat the Maori All Blacks on Tuesday night. What a great week they've had in Wellington. They're here, the whole tour party's down here.
Nobody gave them a chance. Nobody saw them coming. And ultimately, nobody could stop them. Chile's rise to the Rugby World Cup was utterly unprecedented. Nobody, boys, for decades, unheralded and never even discussed, never talked about as a contender for qualification, nothing. Yet Pablo Lemoine's golden generation have transformed rugby in the nation and possibly South America as a whole forever. A record crowd in Chile turning up to the national stadium to see them hold the USA to a point in the worst conditions imaginable before 1 week later they did the impossible, heading to Rugby Town, USA, knowing destiny was at stake. Santiago Villafela's try and then the late penalty on the angle from him himself from 40 metres out, putting Chile into the Rugby World Cup for the first time in their history. A feat that would have seemed insane to even suggest as a possible goal for the team just 18 months earlier. It's hard to overstate just how seismic this was amongst Tier 2 rugby. So instead, let's just look at celebrations, because this, to the whole team, to the whole nation, and to people that have stuck with rugby when they never had a hope, meant the world.
I thought moments like this weren't made for me. You know, it's been a long career. I've come close on a few occasions in semis. You start thinking it's slipping away, but to do it with this bunch of boys for this club, honestly, it means everything. I'm in disbelief.
Everybody who watches the Premiership loves Freddie Burns, a thoroughly decent, hard-working, humble guy who's been through it all, a career tinged with heartbreak, and now someone who just seems so secure in who he is, both as a man and as a rugby player. A proper class Premiership player who won't really be challenging the England squad anytime soon. The heart and soul of a club, the first-class fan favourite, the best backup a team can hope for. And then, with the Premiership final on the line, suddenly his team needed that backup. George Ford off injured for a full hour, Leicester find themselves one score behind with just seconds on the clock. This is the moment Burns has to deliver.
Here it is, Burns to win it! It's the greatest moment in Freddie Burns' life!
The drop goal goes over. Freddie Burns tries to stay calm, cool, screams at everybody not to lose his head, whilst he is clearly losing his own. The most emotional moment of his career, the day he gave up on ever having, all rushing through his head at once. Leicester secure the ball, and Burns himself boots it off the field. This wasn't just a last-minute drop goal to win the league. It was the most glorious celebration of not just Freddie Burns, but the legions of players like him who have come before and will come afterwards. The journeyman, good enough to get a contract anywhere, but not so solid that anyone's ever going to build a team around him. The player nobody dreams of being, and yet all of us that sit on the sidelines for decades instead would have been so proud to be. And because, if we're honest, Burns was right. Moments like that don't really come for players like him. Except, just this once, maybe the rugby gods realised that they love Freddie Burns just as much as the rest of us do. Bonus points as well for nicking the trophy, skipping the team bus home, and live streaming himself in his pants eating McNuggets with the cup sat next to him at 3 a.m. in a hotel that night before taking the trophy on a train home with him and just rocking up at the Leicester train station like this. One of the most beloved men in English rugby, finally getting his day in the sun, even if his hangover didn't really want him to see directly into it.
Capozzo, one person who could electrify this ground. Here he is, Ange Capozzo!
Che disorienta gli avversari! Capozzo!
Need I say more? 36 Six Nations matches without a win. 7 years of straight losses. 15 years of only ever losing to Wales. And their first ever win in Cardiff. A glorious new generation of Italians tasting a proper victory for the first time, thanks to maybe the best performance of a loosehead I've ever seen in Daniele Fischetti, a captain's turn by Michele Lamro,
and that last try was fucking amazing.
And a moment of magic from Ange Capuzzo and Edoardo Padovani, finished off then by the one, the only,
Paolo Garbisi. Paolo Garbisi. Paolo Garbisi. Sbaglia il Millennium Stadium a Cardiff e vittoria!
I could not have put it better myself. Bonus mention to the women's and under-20s team for completing an Italian Grand Slam over Wales at Six Nations, the first time all three Italian sides have ever won the same fixture unanimously, thanks to an outstanding performance by Paolo's brother, Alessandro Garbisi, and Michaela Sillery's last-minute kick here to win it for the women. 2022 has been a year for rugby unlike any other. The ups, the downs, the funny little moments, and the days where it all seemed so ominous, often blurring into one. Yet, so many individual nanoseconds standing out as the most important thing in the world. And so, it could only ever be one of those nanoseconds that tops this list. 2022 also saw the greatest Rugby World Cup final ever played. Men's or women's 15s or 7s, cats or dogs. England entered the tournament as the most dominant side rugby had ever seen in its international history. Their 30-game winning streak dwarfing the achievements of the England men, the All Blacks and Cyprus. Even Cyprus before them. The Black Ferns, on the other hand, 1 year out are in some pretty deep shipwreck. Things not looking good. And so it seemed early on in the showpiece itself as well, as the Red Roses went 2 scores up with perfectly executed rugby. The opening try by Ellie Kildunn, exceptionally well worked, just so good, before the pack then blew through New Zealand for the first of Amy Cocaine's hat-trick of tries. But just as they sprung back from an awful run of results last year in order to play so well in the World Cup, and to make this final on home soil, with every single seat in their national stadium sold out, Wayne Smith working his genius to get this team twisted into shape, the Ferns started to fly. So began the most enthralling, fascinating match of the year. The best game any of us saw across 2022. 65 points spilling out as the two teams took gut punch after jaw-breaking blow. Absolutely nothing being left out there, putting everything they had into every punch. This wasn't a case of who was the better team. It was which of these two impossibly well-matched level sides was on top, was leading the scoreboard as the clock ticked over the 80. A lifetime of hard work had come down to this. For England, their quest for perfection and revenge for the last World Cup final had become an obsession, every detail being poured over as they worked towards being the best rugby team to ever play. But for New Zealand, this was something even greater. This was a chance to change their lives. 45,000 plus packed into the national stadium, 1/3 of the nation watching on TV. A win would boost women's rugby in Aotearoa forevermore. All they had to do was be ahead when the clock hit 80. And that's just when this nanosecond came. England's pack had been eating through them time after time, try after try, coming from maul after maul. New Zealand needed something special. They needed the hand of Jonah Nawu. At 80 minutes and 8 seconds, Nawu's fingertips changed women's rugby forever. This was the result of a lifetime for every player on the pitch. It was a life-changing, career-defining, heart-stopping moment. But most importantly, for this list, speaking as someone who watched an utterly ungodly amount of rugby this year, it was the split second that I felt the most. The one nanosecond where nobody watching was able to sit still or stay quiet. The tick of the clock that meant the world to both teams, and the flick of the wrist that took it from one and handed it to the other. Jonah Nawu's last second line-out steal is the undoubted, undisputed rugby moment of 2022. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That was a hell of a lot of work. Started working on that in January and finally it's done now. Genuinely, there was a list of about 2,000 moments that we narrowed it down from painstakingly.
So now it's a really short video. It's only an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, sorry if your favourite moment didn't make it on. And also sorry to the Cardiff pub team, which came in too late to get on last year's, where Cardiff found themselves with their entire squad locked in South Africa and having to put out a team involving like primary school teachers and like an accountant and students and so on.
Playing against Ontamaka Dupont.
Yeah, against the French and English champions, which was just an amazing thing last year, and it would have been really high on last year's list, but didn't happen in time. Just as the Ospreys winning Montpellier probably would have made this list otherwise. And there's a moment you're going to see in a moment from Bristol, which would have been on this list if it hadn't happened right as we were finishing this video. So there's loads. Thank you for watching it. I really hope you enjoyed it. It's been a huge celebration of everything that's happened in rugby in 2022, and we'll see you for more in 2023 with the Team of the Year coming next week, and then beyond that we'll do this all again in World Cup, Men's World Cup anyway, year 2023.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas as well. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Thank you. Good night.
It's good scrum. Zebre done well there. Oh, that's a little bit loose, and they've given the ball away straight into the hands of Johan Lloyd. Scored a try in this fixture 2.5 years ago. And what a mess. What a mess.
New Zealand, tu te ramai na iwi. Tātai tātou e. Tu te ramai na iwi. Tātai tātou e. Pai a. Mete. Tahi tahi. Tahira. Love you, baby.